All right, welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thank y'all so much for coming over, and we are back on the Recollection Road channel. A little while back, I did the video on the 1970s girls did all these things. Now we got the 1980s. Again, I'm an 80s baby. You know, I was born in 1980 exact. So just trying to see if I remember any of these things. I mean, of course, they were going to be older than me if they're showing them probably about 14, 16 years old. But we will see. Comment below if you remember this. If you did it, don't be ashamed. All right. You're part of history. All right, we ain't gonna waste no more time. Let's jump right into it.
The 1980s was such a distinct time, and much of what we remember about the trends and fads that dominated the decade centered around the things that girls were doing. There were quirky fashion statements and funny behaviors that take us right back to the 80s. So let's take a look back at things that all teenage girls did back in the 1980s. Thank you to Mellan TV for sponsoring this video. Who can forget these fortune teller foldables, or cootie catchers as they were called, that girls would make that could predict your future? First, you would choose a number, then maybe choose a color. The combination of your choices would somehow predict your future, or at the very least, who you might fall in love with. Middle school girls would make a variety of these, decorating them and customizing them for all of their friends.
The cootie catcher,
As young ladies entered their teenage years, music became an important part of life. Whenever their favorite song would come on the radio, or after they popped in a cassette tape into the tape deck, there's a really good chance they would belt out the power ballad into a hairbrush. Dancing around the bedroom and singing into a brush was the best they could do at the time, and there's no doubt you caught your sister doing this a time or two.
That reminds me of Stranger Things, man.
If you're watching this video, then there's a good chance you love a good documentary. Lately, I've been watching a great one called The Reagan Presidency, which is a 3-part series on Mellan TV, and it captures the events of the decade that shaped Reagan's decision-making. It really helps to frame up the time period, which made the 1980s unforgettable. Mellan TV is completely ad-free, and what I love is that it includes a growing list of videos offered in 4K. Mellan TV is television worth watching because it offers you a curated selection of the finest documentaries from around the world. It's a gateway to the compelling drama of history, science, nature, crime, and beyond, with new programs added weekly. Click the link in the description box or scan this QR code to get a 30-day free trial to watch The Reagan Presidency and all of the rest of Mellan TV's extensive collection of over 3,000 documentaries. Start your free trial today. Fashion in the 1980s was dominated by neon and nylon, but one trend that girls adopted during this time was wearing shoulder pads, often with a blazer. The new look that was borrowed from the 1940s, with exaggerated shoulders, could be found on celebrities, politicians, and even teenagers. It was a physically assertive look that certainly made a statement as girls walked into high school wearing the power suits. The higher the shoulder pads, the better. One specific hobby for girls in the 1980s, especially if you were a boy-crazy teen, was carrying on a phone conversation with your best friend for hours. Girls would literally talk until someone else needed to use the phone. Who remembers getting wrapped up in the stretchy phone cord while they talked? Or maybe you twisted the cord around your finger, but regardless of how you fidgeted, waiting your turn for the phone was a real dilemma in the 1980s, especially if you had a teenage girl in the house.
That's the biggest thing, man, with the texting.
Makeup in the 1980s was essential if you wanted to fit in with the popular girls. One way that teens kept their makeup organized was in something called a caboodle. At some point during the 80s, someone decided to reinvent tackle boxes by making them pink and teal, and they called them Kaboodles, which stored makeup and other beauty supplies. This makeup suitcase made taking your makeup with you much easier, as you could easily cram it into your locker or take it to a friend's house for a sleepover.
Again, man, comment below, y'all.
During the 1980s, passing notes in class was like modern-day texting. Girls would even get fancy with how they folded them. Some looked like triangle footballs, while others had fancy tabs you could pull to open. Some girls were even pros at passing them around, because sending a note across the classroom without the teacher knowing was an art form, and girls in the 1980s knew how to get it done. Mini notes would be passed back and forth many times, having a running dialogue that might be kept up for most of the school day. There are some objects that when you see them, instantly remind you of the 1980s. This sharp radio tape deck is one of them. It seems like every girl had one. They were sold in pastel colors, and they were small and sleek, making them easy to carry while also fitting the style of any girl's bedroom decor. Remember how the metal antennas would get worn out from going up and down, eventually bending and breaking?
Yeah. I remember that on the radio I had.
It seems that every young girl in the 1980s dreamed of getting one of those metal daybeds for their bedroom.
My sister
It may
had
have
one.
started with a friend getting one, which made you jealous, but eventually your time would come too. The twin-size bed that looked like a couch made you feel grown up, and who didn't love the trundle bed that could be pulled out when having a sleepover? The bedding was usually filled with floral patterns and frills that completed the 1980s daybed look. Big hair, and more specifically high bangs, was required for girls who grew up in the 1980s. The product that made this possible was a large can of Aquanet hairspray. Not only did it hold your hair firmly, but it also would overspray onto your face, and you could even taste it. The aerosol spray from the millions and millions of girls spraying it onto their hair was even blamed on making the hole in the ozone layer worse. The chemicals in Aquanet hairspray would eventually be altered to make them safer, but nothing made your hair harder than a rock than a can of 1980s Aquanet. Speaking of girls' hair, prior to lacquering up your bangs, girls would dress up their hair with a variety of bows, ponytails, and barrettes. Big bows were in, and so were these ponytailers with the colorful balls that could match any outfit. Plastic barrettes were also popular, with a variety of colors and shapes that are quintessential 1980s.
I remember all that, man. You see all the girls.
Before
at
there were
school.
nail salons in every strip mall, girls would head down to the local drugstore and pick up a set of Lee Presson Nails if they wanted to look glamorous. Lee Presson Nails were all over commercials back then, and they offered 3 different lengths: active, natural, and glamour. The peel and stick nails were fun for young girls to experiment with, and although they didn't stay on very long, they made a big impact on the popularity of getting your nails done, especially for those on a budget. Young girls everywhere were drawn in by lonely and desperate stuffed animals called pound puppies. The pitiful storyline played into the good nature of kids wanting to save puppies from the pound. And the marketing ploy worked, with girls adopting an army of these pound puppies in the 1980s. The plush pets were so popular that they even developed a TV series and published books about pound puppies.
I'm just trying to remember what I seen in my house.
The white canvas shoes known as Keds were around for decades, but in the 1980s, they were the perfect shoe for girls looking for something affordable and fashionable. The comfortable shoe was easy to match with just about any outfit, and they looked great with or without socks. The popularity of the shoe was validated by Jennifer Grey wearing a pair in the huge 1987 movie Dirty Dancing, which made them an even bigger fashion statement. Do you remember when your mom would cut out coupons from the newspaper to save a little money at the grocery store?
That's
If
my
so,
wife.
then you probably used those same coupons as play money when you were a young child. Girls especially would pretend to be at the supermarket and use the coupons as if they were real money as they played with friends or siblings. The 1980s was a heyday for coupons, and everybody got in on the action, even young kids. Finally, who remembers drinking flavored water back in the 1980s? I'm not talking about Kool-Aid, but rather Crystal Light, the diet version of Kool-Aid. After it was created in the early 1980s, the low-calorie flavoring became a household favorite for women looking to lose weight. Endorsement deals with the likes of Linda Evans and Priscilla Presley helped push the brand into the zeitgeist of the 1980s. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and
All right, so you got 2 on the girls. I want to see what the guys, man, what the guys were doing. Uh, this is a cool video. It's a lot of stuff I remember. Like I said, that bed. I remember my sister had that bed when we lived in the apartment building. Um, and I remember her having her hair with the little balls and barrettes. I remember all that. Rest in peace to my sister, man. This was a cool video though. I'm pretty sure everybody can relate to this. It's just so nostalgic because like when you go back and look at the times, it's just how everything was just so different, man. But like I said, I never had a note passed to me or passed a note, but I do remember having long phone conversations. That's for sure. All right, shout out to the Recollection Road channel for the video, man. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out.